What's up, guys? Back again with more training tips. Tonight we're going to be covering some back work, specifically some pull down variations and mostly single arm. This is kind of in between a high row and a pull down, technically a pull down, but more of a high row type movement. And then we'll also cover the low row tonight as well. So starting with this high row movement, this is going to be something you would utilize normally to target the lat. Whether you have a stack loaded machine like this, or you have a plate loaded high row, because Hammer Strength also does a good plate loaded high row, you'll pretty much be setting up for them the same way. The only difference is that the plate loaded high row, it has a little bit more of a forward angle on the arms here, but this is a really common Hammer Strength machine. So starting with your setup from the seat positioning, you're going to want to come to a point where when you grab this handle and you come down through the movement, you're able to end, I like to say, with your hand right about at shoulder height. Some people like it a little lower, maybe just above chest height, but I find shoulder height works pretty well for me. And then make sure that you have the knee pad, if the machine you're using has one, adjusted to the point where you can lock into this really heavy, because in the same way that you would lock into the knee pad when you're doing pull downs on cable, you're going to want to do that same thing here on this machine, okay? Now, the other kind of caveat to these machines, specifically with the Hammer Strength machines, you'll notice when you come down, the handles diverge away from the midline. My elbows are going out to the outer edges of my body. They are not coming towards my body. And understanding what we understand about how to target the lat more effectively, we know we need to keep that elbow closer to the midline of the body to engage the lat more. So I don't usually like doing these bilaterally, so both hands at the same time. I prefer to do these single arm setup unilaterally. And there's a little bit more you can do to kind of optimize, I hate using that word, but optimize your positioning on this as well. Specifically, how you're rotating and leaning into the movement itself. So we're gonna assume you're starting with your right side. Just as a quick tip, for any movement, start with your weaker side if you're doing a unilateral movement, and then move to your stronger side and match the reps with your stronger side, rather than starting with the strong side and then finishing with the weak and maybe not being able to match those reps. That way you can even out any imbalances you might have and make sure you're not growing unevenly. But assuming we're starting out with the right side here, assuming everything is set up from the knee and the hip, or the seat positioning. Actually, the hip reminded me. One more thing I want to talk about in terms of hip positioning. For this type of a movement, you can set up for this a few different ways with where your hip is placed on the machine. So if you come really far forward, which is what most people do, and the hip is under the shoulder and you're leaning back, make sure you aren't leaning to the point where you're now just making this a row at an upward angle. Because if you're doing that and you're making this a row at an upward angle, all you're doing is working that upper back, rear delts, traps, rhomboids, in that mid-back kind of region. You're not targeting the lats as effectively. If you want to target the lats, which we want to do, my preferred way to set up for this is to kind of be a little bit lordoze, almost straight back or slightly lordosed in the low back, with the hips at the shoulder point. So you're sitting shoulders over your hips, or just slightly hips behind the shoulders, but your shoulders here, hips slightly back behind the shoulders. And then make sure you're getting a good arch and stretch through the back by doing what we always do on back movements, keeping your chin tucked to keep that head driven back like you're pushing it into the back of a car seat headrest. Now that we've got that out of the way, setting up for the pull itself, remember what I said on your pull downs, where you don't need to be death gripping this, because this is a movement where it's very easy, especially because we're going to be pulling underhand rather than overhand, to again emphasize more lat. This is a movement where it's very easy to death grip this, and then when you're death gripping it, involving a lot of bicep and your forearm as well. So grab it relatively loosely. You can see I can hold this here without issue. I have 30 pounds on here, so I have nothing on this, but you want to be able to hold this relatively easily, and you're not stressing just trying to hold it like this and over engaging your arm or your shoulder. Now, as far as the rotation of the body that I talked about, you'll see I'm not sitting head on, straight on like this and pulling down, okay? Because again, that's no different than if I did this with two hands. I'm now pulling the elbow away from the midline of the body and losing that lat, okay? So what I do is I put one foot back or to the side. You can keep it kind of wherever you want as long as it's comfortable. and then put the foot that is on the side that I am currently working, so matching foot to the dominant hand that is working, I put that foot forward. I will then let my chest drift into the pad. Remember, the chest pad is here to support you. It is not just here for show. Use it, let your body pull into this, and let the chest pad support you while keeping posture through your spine to be able to keep tension on that lat. Because when we are using the pad for support, we can lean in and then come forward. And you'll notice I am not letting my shoulder drift up here. I'm keeping it locked down into the lat, so all of that tension is through the lat. Not up here, because when I'm up here, all of that is through the shoulder, and it's honestly really fucking uncomfortable on my shoulder, even with only 30 pounds. So don't do that. Keep the shoulder tucked down into the lat, and only come up as high as you can while still being engaged in the lat and not overstretching at the shoulder. Keep that head back. Let yourself rotate as you come forward to stretch. Pull down. And we're keeping the elbow as close to the body as possible. We're not letting it rotate out. We're not pulling with the forefinger and the thumb and rotating the elbow out. We are keeping the elbow in, and the same cue we use on the cable lat pull down, and again, any back movement basically where we are targeting the lat. Put that elbow in your pocket. Drive the elbow straight down like you're putting it into your pocket, and keep that elbow close to your body. And that is going to be pure lat from here to here. That's it. It's a super simple one to set up for. Don't overcomplicate it. I see so many people trying to do this overhand with two hands. I see people attaching like cable grips onto this to try and do it neutral, and that's fine. If you want to do it neutral, you can. Some people prefer that. I personally prefer underhand and find a little bit better lat targeting with the underhand grip. But that's really it for this one, guys. It's super simple. The one thing I will just really emphasize here on this movement is with any lat movement, again, don't let that elbow fall out to the point where you are now coming off of that lock you had into the lat and you are letting it drift up, because you're losing that tension on the lat and you don't have any stress on the lat anymore, which effectively makes this worthless for what we're trying to target with it. And I think that pretty much covers this one. So we will move on now to some of the other back movements once one opens up. All right, so next movement is going to be your underhand low row. You could technically do this with a higher point, rowing point as well, where you're bringing the elbow back a little bit higher, but it's not as, it doesn't serve a great purpose there, and there's other movements that are better for your upper back if you're trying to target the upper or even the mid back. So this is a low row that is predominantly going to be used for the lats, okay? And we're gonna set up for this pretty much in the exact same way we just did for the lat pull down from above. We're gonna do this single arm, because again, this has the same issue where when we are rowing back, we're diverging from the body. Those elbows are pulling away from the body. It's not as bad on this. You can do this bilaterally and still get an effective target on the lat there, but doing this unilaterally in the same setup, I find that it just targets that lower lat so much more effectively than doing it bilaterally. So personal preference there, try it both ways. Your low row machine, or the machine you would set up for a low row on, might be different than this. This is again just the hammer strength equipment that everybody and their brother seems to have in their facilities. So the setup through the chest pad and the seat is going to be pretty much identical. I sit a little bit higher up on this because again, I'm pulling low, it's a low row, so we can target the lat and come low and close to the body with the elbow, okay? But the feet positioning, it's exactly the same. My front foot on the side that I'm going to be pulling with is forward, and then my other foot is back just for stabilization wherever it feels comfortable. You put it here, you can put it behind you, whatever. The only difference in setup here is that you'll notice the chest pad is not vertical here, it's angled a little bit forward, something like this. So I like to set up on these with a little bit of an arch on the back, hips behind the shoulders. So if these are my hips, these are my shoulders are up here against the pad, or my chest is against the pad and my shoulders are up here. And then my hips are back a little bit, offset under my shoulders, not set up vertically. So we're offset a little bit there. And then when we're coming forward, same thing. I want you to be able to grab this relatively loosely and hang out here in the stretch. You should come as far forward as you can in the stretch without losing tension in the lat. Again, that comes down to the shoulder. If you are, let's say, stretching here and you're leaving that tension, you're letting it out in the shoulder and it's coming off the lat, you're going too far. Only go as far as you can stretch before that shoulder starts to roll out and you lose tension on the lat. So here is about where that is for me. And then we're just going to row back through, keeping the chin tucked and the head back. When you come forward through a stretch, your head might drift forward some, but keep that chest high and try to actively think about pushing your head back and then pull through the movement, okay? Just like that. The goal here, again, keeping the elbow close to the body, the midline of the body, as close as possible, and rotate a little bit if you need to get that stretch through the lat, but don't let out at the shoulder and come off of the lock into the lat that you have there. Just come back. Here. The thing I see most people do on movements like this, they'll grab both of these, even if they do it with just one, and they'll do this and then throw the weight back. They're doing this shit, where you're rocking and you're doing absolutely fucking nothing for your back, okay? Completely worthless. Because all you're doing is throwing yourself around to move the weight, and then you're yanking yourself back and then pulling through with the arm. You're getting more arm work than you are back, most likely. Will you build some back doing that? Sure, yeah, you probably will. Would it be more effective if you actually focused on how you're moving the weight and then worked properly? Yeah, absolutely. That doesn't mean you need to go lightweight, but if you have to drop a few pounds to be able to accommodate perfect form or as close to perfect as possible, and then keep that intensity up, do that instead of just throwing more weight on and yanking the weight around, because it's not going to do anything for you. There's not much more to explain on these. These are super basic movements, but they are staple movements, and they're really going to help guys who are struggling to engage with their lats and you just think you need to do straight bar pull downs to build your lats, because I guarantee you it's not working for you. If it is, great. But for most people, they need a lot more lat, myself included. So focus on movements like this that are going to allow you to effectively target the lat specifically and get that work where you need it. I think that is about it for this episode, guys. As always, like, subscribe, turn on your notifications. I post these every single week. We go through a whole bunch of stuff. So comment down below what you want to see me demonstrate for you and give you tips on. And until next time, take it easy.